In this video, I'm going to be reviewing the Papermind Tomoe River hardcover notebook. I'll go over the specs, I will do a paper test, and I'll tell you what I like and don't like about this notebook coming up. Blake here with Blake's Broadcast. On this channel, I review fountain pens, paper, and ink, and as always, I put links in the show notes in the description below. And if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. It really helps out my channel. Before we get into the proper review, I want to do a little bit of background on Tomoe River Paper. And if you're not interested in this, there are chapters below so you can kind of skip ahead, and I apologize if this rambles just a little bit. But Tomoe River is a paper that has been, much loved by fountain pen users, and it was a very unique paper. It was very thin, it was very crinkly, it was very smooth, and it held up to fountain pen ink really, really nicely. Now, there are, to my understanding, and this is just my knowledge going off of what's readily available, and basically my understanding is there are 3 versions of Tomoe River. The first 2 versions were made by a company called Tomoe, which is where the Tomoe River name comes from. And that first paper that they made was on machine number 7. This is the Tomoe paper that is the most famous, that all the fountain pen users really liked. That caused, people to start hoarding paper when it was announced that it was being discontinued. Now, this paper, I believe, came out in the 1960s as a Bible paper with the idea that you're printing a lot of pages in a small book and you're printing on both sides, so you need something that can handle the ink and not have too much ghosting. And so in that sense, I think Tomoe River was a really, really nice paper. And then a few years ago, or maybe it's more than a few years ago now, Tomoe River, I think just the economics of the paper stopped making sense for the mill and they discontinued it. And then they changed the machine from machine number 7 to machine number 9. And if a paper making machine isn't an identical copy of one another, the paper is always going to be different. I don't know exactly the technical details on that, but that is my understanding. So they moved it to this machine number 9 and people did not like it. The performance, I tested it. It was not as good. It was more prone to feathering. Didn't like it near as much. Since then, Tomoe has discontinued that paper, the one made on machine number 9, and now there's another manufacturer making a Tomoe paper called Tomoe S, and the S stands for Sanzen, which is the paper mill. And this is a brand new paper. It is not the original Tomoe, but it was designed and made to have some similar characteristics to that original machine number 7 Tomoe. I have always appreciated the original Tomoe, but I never personally got on with it. I couldn't make it through a notebook. I know because I have 10 or so original Tomoe River notebooks and I haven't been able to finish any of them. And I think it's just because the original is very glass surface-like. I personally prefer the feeling of a more natural paper, and I think this new Tomoe River paper maintains a lot of the best aspects of the original one while giving you a little bit more of a natural feel. So I'm really excited about this notebook. All right, let's get on with the review here. This is the new Papermind Tomoe River notebook. I'm really excited about these. They come in a green cover and a black cover, and they come with a 7mm rule or blank like this. Now, they are an A5 size. They have the 52 GSM Sanzen S paper. The guide sheet is ruled and grid. I'll show that in a moment. Stitched lay flat binding, pink blotter sheet, 400 pages, so that's 200 sheets of paper, 25 signatures. There's an elastic strap and there's a fabric bookmark here. And taking the belly band off here. The cover is a Japanese leatherette and it's a very thin hardcover, but it's quite rigid, so it's very easy to write on. The reason I made it so thin is that I want to keep the thickness of the notebook down. It's roughly 0.68 inches thick, which is very good for a 400-page hardcover notebook. So I wanted to be able to have a lot of pages without it becoming too thick. Black elastic strap, rounded corners here, flat spine, and then just my typical foil stamp, Papermind, thepapermind.com, and made in Japan here. And that's really the only marking on the actual book itself. On the inside, we have a gray paste down, and then for the blank version, we have a guide sheet with a 7mm rule on the front and 5mm grid on the back. And then all of them come with a pink blotter sheet, including the ruled one. The ruled one does not have a guide sheet for obvious reasons. We have our typical gray paste down. This is a high quality Tomoe art paper. This is what we use in all of our Japanese made notebooks. And then we go right into the notebook. The notebook pages in the blank, of course, are not marked at all. They are completely blank. And this notebook lays very flat. It is very, very flexible. It's very comfortable to use. And of course, like the original Tomoe River, this new Tomoe River S has an amazing drape. In the back, we have the paste down again, no pocket, trying to keep this as slim as possible. Now there is a woven bookmark here, just one, keeping it simple. Now going into the ruled one, this is the black color, and you have that pink paste down. This is my personal notebook that I've been using, and we have a grid 7mm. Now this grid I have modified slightly from the other 7mm grid I've used in my other notebooks. With this one, and it might not show up on the camera there, but this is a micro dot. So if you look really closely at it, it's a bunch of little dots instead of a solid line. This gives the ruling, especially on a paper like this, a nice subtlety to the line while still being very visible. So I really like that. In terms of the guide sheet, I can just show you how that will work here. You would put this underneath the paper, page that you want to write on, and then you can see the grid through it or the ruling through it. So you kind of can use this blank as a ruled notebook or a grid notebook or a blank notebook as you see fit. So you get a lot of options there by using this laminated guide sheet. And because it's laminated, it'll last a long time. I know from using many other guide sheets, usually somehow I get ink on them and they're done pretty quickly. Whereas this will be a lot more resistant and durable. And so it's something you'd be able to use even beyond this notebook when you are finished. As I said, there are 25 signatures, and if we look closely, you can just see they're really, really tiny signatures. The build quality of this notebook is excellent. They're 16-page signatures, which is pretty much standard, I think, for Japanese Smithsonian notebooks. The European ones, sometimes they go for 32, like Galen Leather typically does a 32. Now with Tomoe River, the difference there isn't necessarily that big because the paper drapes so nicely, but there is somewhat of a difference. It's a lot more noticeable on other papers. Now let's do the paper test. Let's review the paper test and then we can compare it to an old Tomoe River from machine number 7. So I'm using a prototype one here, which this is a cover that was not used, but the book block is exactly the same and the paper is the same. So looking at the face of this, everything looks great. There's no feathering. The lines are very smooth and there's some nice shading here. This is a paper that does well with sheening and shimmering inks. I would put this right below the Cosmo Air Light when it comes to the best for sheening and shimmering. It's very, very good. Now, on the back, basically all of the fountain pens here look really, really good. Now, pens that caused a little bit of trouble is a Auto Fude Ball 1.5mm, just a touch coming through. You could really write on both sides, no problem with that. The same thing for the Pentel Energel 1.0mm. Everything else here looks really, really good. And again, this is 52 GSM paper. This is super, super, super thin paper. So this is very amazing performance in my opinion. And then we have the Troublemaker pens, which all bled through, and the Copic and the permanent Stettler did make it onto the other page. Now, as a comparison to the old Tomoe River, this is a elemental notebook with the original 52 GSM machine number 7 paper. And this one has kind of a crazy bright green dot grid, so ignore that. But when we look at the paper color, I actually think that the Tomoe River S Paper is actually whiter than this paper, which is a little bit more of an off-white. When it comes to the face of this, I think they look very similar. The original Tomoe River has a bit more of a line smoothing effect. I also think that there's a bit more line spread on this. Now, it's not bad line spread at all, but I do notice that the strokes are a little bit fatter on this paper than this paper in general. Now, in terms of the feel of the paper, I think this one is more crinkly. I also think it does feel, now this is just my feeling, this isn't a technical thing, these are both 52 GSM. This feels a little bit lighter, a little bit less stiff, whereas this is a little bit more of a crisp feeling, a little bit more structure to it. Now, if we go over, I think what's most obvious here to me, there's a lot more ghosting. Now, both of these have a lot of ghosting. Let's not pretend otherwise. They both ghost quite a bit. This is a lot more see-through than this paper. Now, one of the things that Sanzen did, or said they did, is that they used like a pigment, a white pigment in this paper to help reduce ghosting. I believe this is a similar technology that's used in the Gmund blocker paper that we have in our blocker notebooks, but this is an even thinner paper, and the performance is just really, really excellent. And you can see how that actually shows up here. I mean, there's quite a noticeable difference. Now, in terms of bleeding, I do see a little bit more spotting here on the Pilot 3.8. I also see a bit more coming through on the Pentel Energel, and about similar on the Oto Fude Ball. Again, both of these I think you could write on both sides, but if you had to say one pen that's less compatible with these, I would say it is those wider gel rollerball pens. They tend to bleed a little bit. Now, I think that the Copic Sketch and the Sharpie and the permanent marker actually did better on the old Tomoe River than the new Tomoe River S. Now, I don't think any of these pens are appropriate for either of these, so I don't think that really matters. I think the oil drawing pen did a little bit better on the Sanzen, the Tomoe River S, than the original, but again, you're not really going to use it. But I think for normal pens, the actual paper performance of this is better. I've been using my flex nibs on it. Coating on it is very strong. I don't have any issues with it breaking down when I'm using my flex nibs. Now, obviously, you know, if you're really scratching back and forth in the same spot, you're going to get it to bleed. It's going to go through. There's nothing you can do about that. But normal writing with flex nibs, you should have no problems with this paper, just like the original one. So that is really, really good. I think the actual fountain pen performance here looks better than this. They're very, very close though. Let's do some live writing here. So we can start with this Clio Scribent Optima. This is a broad. I'm just going to pop to another area here. There is definitely more tension on the surface here. It's a very smooth paper, but this is a lot more glassy, the original one. And then we'll try a more flexible nib here. This is a Scribo Puma Extra Fine Flex. And I'm railroading a bit here. Now, interesting note here, I'm noticing more railroading on the new S than the original. So that is interesting. I guess just the more tension on this surface is maybe the difference. This is a vintage Mont Blanc 149, and it does kind of flex a little bit here. You can get some line variation. In terms of dry times, they're very, very close. These are not fast drying papers. This new S is a little bit faster. In practical use, I don't think it really makes much of a difference. In terms of susceptibility to like oils from your hands, let's see what happens here. Well, let's do this one first. I can see a little bit there. Let's try a different finger here. It doesn't seem like it's a big deal. I've been using this paper, like I said, for a long time now, well, for several months now, daily, and I haven't really had any issues with fingerprints or anything like that, like is more common on some of the other coated papers. Cosmere Light and Graphilo paper can be more susceptible to fingerprints. This is pretty good. Okay, so what are my pros and cons for the Papermind Tomoe River hardcover notebook? Well, obviously, I'm going to really like this notebook. I designed it myself, so there are a lot of things that I like here. 400 pages in a small package. You get a rigid hardcover that's not too thick, and the paper itself is very, very fountain pen friendly. I've been using 2 of these now for the last 5 or 6 months, and I've really, really been enjoying it. I've been able to use it nonstop, which is something I wasn't really able to do with the old Tomoe River. So I really, really like that. Build quality is excellent, lays flat. You get a blotter sheet, and in the case of the blank one, you also get a laminated guide sheet that's quite durable. You get a bookmark, you get the elastic cover. There's really no excess here. It's a very functional tool for writing, something that does not get in the way. So I really, really like that. The other thing is it's only $32. I think this is very competitively priced for 400 pages and a hardcover, especially something that's made this nicely. I just think it's a great value for fountain pen users. You get 2x the pages of a regular notebook for a very fair price. Now in terms of cons, well, it only comes in ruled and blank at the moment. Now the blank does have the grid and the lined sheets, so you can get by with that. I would like to do a dot grid version in the future. That would be really nice. I'd like to do more sizes, and I'd like to do more cover colors in the future. But right now, the line is limited. We'll see how you guys like it. Give me feedback, and the next iteration, the next batch, we can do something new here. But that's pretty much it. Do you like this notebook? Let me know in the comment section below. If you like this video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more fountain pen, paper, and ink videos, please hit the subscribe button. Thank you so much, and until next time.